Imagine watching a woman die, and then watching her react after death. In 1793, when Charlotte Corday was executed by guillotine, a man lifted her severed head and slapped it. What happened next froze the crowd in terror. Witnesses swore her face changed, her cheeks flushed red, her expression twisted into rage. Not reflex, not illusion, but emotion. Doctors later tried to explain it away. Nerves, muscles, electricity. But the people who were there knew what they saw, and Corday was not alone. Across history, executioners, priests and soldiers recorded the same horror. Severed heads whose eyes followed movement, lips that tried to speak, faces that reacted to pain seconds after death. If consciousness can linger even briefly, then death is not a switch, it's a process. And that raises a terrifying question. What if someone famous, powerful, and dangerous was still aware after execution? What if they tried to say something that terrified those in power? That's where Anne Boleyn's story truly begins. Most traitors in Tudor England suffered the same fate. Their heads were cut off, dipped in tar, and mounted on spikes above London Bridge. It was meant to humiliate, to warn, to erase sympathy. But Anne Boleyn was different. After her execution in 1536, her head was never displayed. No spike, no public warning, no official record of where it went. It simply vanished. In a world obsessed with spectacle, this silence is deafening. Anne was not just another condemned criminal, she was a queen, the woman for whom England broke with the Catholic Church. And yet, once the sword fell, history slammed shut. Why hide her head? Why erase it instead of using it as propaganda? Some say Henry VIII couldn't bear to see it. Others believe something about Anne's final moments frightened witnesses. Because if her lips truly moved, if her eyes truly opened, then displaying her head would risk something far worse than sympathy. It would risk questions. And questions were dangerous. Anne Boleyn was dangerous long before she lost her head. Not because she was cruel, but because she thought. In Tudor England, a woman's silence was her survival. Anne refused both. Educated in foreign courts, fluent, sharp-tongued, and politically aware, she returned to England with ideas that frightened men who ruled by tradition. She questioned priests. She read banned books. She spoke about power as if she understood it. Because she did. This was not how English women behaved, especially not queens. Queens were meant to smile, bear sons, and disappear quietly. Anne challenged that role openly. Courtiers whispered she was arrogant, ambassadors called her unstable, but the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Anne understood influence. And once people like Anne understand power, they become impossible to control. That's why her fall was inevitable, not because she failed as a queen, but because she succeeded too much. And powerful men do not forgive women who expose their weaknesses. Henry VIII did not fall in love with Anne Boleyn. He became consumed by her. Used to women who surrendered easily, Henry was unprepared for refusal. Anne would not be his mistress. She would not be used and discarded. She demanded commitment, a crown or nothing. That single boundary drove Henry mad. For 7 years he chased her relentlessly, writing desperate letters, showering her with gifts, promising the impossible. This wasn't romance, it was possession. Anne became a prize to be won, proof that the king could still bend the world to his will. When Henry finally married her, he believed the chase was over. But obsession doesn't survive ownership. Once Anne became queen, Henry's desire began to rot into resentment. The woman he had destroyed a church for now spoke back to him, challenged him, influenced policy. The very traits that attracted Henry became reasons to fear her. And kings eliminate what they fear. Anne Boleyn's fate was sealed the day her child was born. Henry hadn't risked his crown, his church, and his reputation for a daughter. He wanted a son, an heir to secure his bloodline. When Anne gave birth to Elizabeth, something inside Henry snapped. The affection vanished, the gifts stopped, the private dinners ended. Anne went from obsession to inconvenience overnight, and in the shadows, Thomas Cromwell noticed. He saw a queen with no protection, no male heir, and a king already looking elsewhere. Jane Seymour was waiting. Anne sensed the danger, but she miscalculated. She believed her crown still shielded her. She confronted Henry. She demanded loyalty. She fought back. That was her final mistake. In Tudor England, queens did not challenge kings. They were replaced. Cromwell began preparing a solution. Not a divorce, not exile, something permanent. Lazy people don't feel guilty. So why do you? You call yourself lazy, but notice this. You hate being stuck. Lazy people don't overthink. They don't feel ashamed. They don't promise themselves tomorrow. What you're feeling isn't laziness, it's resistance. A hidden part of your mind learned that trying leads to pain. So now, it protects you by stopping you. It whispers, "I'll do it later. Not today. You're tired." Not to ruin you, but to keep you safe. The problem? Safe slowly turns into stuck. If this hit you, the full explanation is in the long video. Your shadow might be running your life, and you don't even know it. Watch the full video. You'll never call yourself lazy again. Anne Boleyn was not arrested because she was guilty. She was arrested because the decision had already been made. The charges were absurd. Adultery with multiple men, incest with her own brother, treason against the king. Some of the alleged encounters occurred when Anne was visibly pregnant or recovering from childbirth. Biology itself disproved the accusations. It didn't matter. Truth was irrelevant in Tudor politics. Confessions were extracted through torture. Timelines were rewritten. Witnesses were bribed or silenced. Anne was taken to the Tower of London without warning, watched by the same men who once bowed to her. Her trial was a performance, not a process. Even Henry VIII, the man she once loved, was forced to sit in judgment. Anne defended herself with intelligence and dignity, but the verdict was never in doubt. This was not justice, it was erasure. When Anne Boleyn was sentenced to death, the method chosen was unlike any other Tudor execution. Instead of the usual axe, Henry VIII imported a French swordsman from Calais, precise, skilled, and foreign. Officially, it was mercy. Quicker, cleaner, more humane. But the court whispered differently. Why spare the spectacle of a typical beheading? Why break tradition in such a rigid kingdom? Some historians suggest darker reasons. Perhaps Henry feared something about Anne's final moments. Perhaps he wanted control over what would remain of her. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, Anne dressed in grey silk, looking every inch a queen. Calm, composed, she delivered her final words to the crowd. "I am come hither to die, and will speak nothing against it." But as the sword fell, witnesses saw something that would haunt them forever. Her lips moved, her eyes fluttered. Was she trying to speak? As the French swordsman's blade fell, cutting through neck and bone, witnesses froze. Anne Boleyn's lips continued to move, as if forming words no one could hear. Her eyes opened and closed. Some claim she was trying to speak, to reveal a secret, a truth too dangerous for the court to hear. Medical experts today might call it a nerve reflex, a last twitch of dying muscles. But in 1536, this was beyond explanation. The air itself seemed to shudder. People whispered of divine signs, of curses, of a queen still conscious in death. And then came the horror. Unlike other traitors, Anne's head never appeared on a spike, never displayed as a warning. In a world obsessed with spectacle, her absence was deafening. Someone powerful clearly wanted her final message silenced. And the question that chills to this day: what was Anne Boleyn trying to say in those fleeting seconds after death? Anne Boleyn's head didn't follow Tudor tradition. Unlike traitors before her, whose severed heads were displayed on spikes above London Bridge, hers disappeared completely. No public warning, no gruesome trophy, no record. In a kingdom that thrived on fear and spectacle, this silence is shocking. Where could it have gone? Some speculate Henry VIII ordered it hidden, afraid that her final expressions might reveal truths too dangerous to survive. Others suggest that Elizabeth I, her daughter, secretly preserved it when she became queen, ensuring her mother received dignity that the crown once denied. Archaeological digs and 19th century renovations in the tower uncovered bones, but none could definitively prove the head's resting place. The mystery refuses to die. It's not just a question of history, it's a question of power, fear, and secrets someone wanted buried forever. And perhaps the final truth Anne wanted to tell is still waiting, somewhere. Nearly 500 years later, Anne Boleyn's story still refuses to rest. Her execution was meant to erase her, but it failed spectacularly. Her daughter, Elizabeth I, would rise to become one of England's greatest rulers. Yet the biggest mystery remains. What happened to Anne's head? Was it quietly reunited with her body by Elizabeth, hidden to protect a secret, or preserved as evidence of Henry VIII's crimes? Was it destroyed to erase her memory, or does it still exist somewhere, waiting to tell the world the truth of those final moments? Every detail of her death, from the unusual execution to the moving lips and eyes, points to something more than history recorded. And here's the haunting part. If Anne's head tried to speak, perhaps it succeeded in warning us all that power, obsession, and injustice leave marks even death cannot erase. Where do you think Anne's head went?